Live from the BDN Studios, it's Bang and Dang.
That's awesome.
If you don't like that, then
You ain't black.
Welcome to Quarter Wikipedia with your hosts Bang and Dang, and this week we got a mega-sized, almost the size of an episode as the size of the impact of the topic we are reading about today. This is the Industrial Revolution. But before we kick this off, I want to ask you guys to head on over to our YouTube if you're listening to this on the podcast, and go and give that a like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell at Bang Dang Network over on YouTube, where every single week we release a new episode according to Wikipedia, Battles of the American Civil War, and Outlaws and Gunslingers, and maybe soon to be added more things as well if things go as planned. Well, maybe not as planned, but maybe. You never know. Go give us a subscription over there, and if you're listening on the podcast, Apple, Spotify, give us a review, share us, and give us like 5 stars. If not, just give us a star, I guess. I don't know, whatever you think is worthy of it. But let's get some interaction going on this old podcast here. According to Wikipedia this week, the Industrial Revolution. Could the Industrial Revolution be the biggest in the world? A scam? Why would it be a scam? Having industries that are making things for you instead of your hands? That's a scam? Could be
the best thing in the world besides vehicles.
Greatest contribution to humankind ever.
Besides tractors for farmers. And farmers were like, holy shit.
Well, what do you think the Industrial Revolution is?
Obviously.
Right. The Industrial Revolution, also known as the First Industrial Revolution, because apparently there was a second one.
Well, after the war.
It was a period of global transition of human economy towards more efficient and stable manufacturing processes that succeeded the Agricultural Revolution. Started from Great Britain, continental Europe, and the United States. It occurred from the period of around 1760 to about 1820 to 40. Yeah, and that's not even when the greatest stuff is coming yet. No. The earliest recorded use of the term Industrial Revolution was July 1799. What they call it before? By French envoy Louis Guillaume Otto, announcing that France had entered the race to industrialize.
Oh, look at that shit.
In his 1976 book Keywords, A Vocabulary of Culture and Society, Raymond Williams states in the entry for industry, the idea of a new social order based on a major industrial change was clear in Southey and Owen between 1811 and 1818 and was implicit as early as Blake in the early 1970s and Wordsworth at the turn of the 19th century. I'm guessing these are London towns or something.
Yeah, they're going to have that shit first.
The term Industrial Revolution applied to the technological change was becoming more common by the late 1830s, as in Jerome Adolphe Blanqueu's description in 1837 of La Révolution Industrielle.
Oh.
One thing I've noticed, I've noticed since we've been doing this little series is almost every article is written by a
Frenchman?
A UK guy.
Right. Oh, dude, everything's written by UK. UK is still the center of the earth.
I'm just saying. The English language, it's all these stuff is written by UK guys.
Right. When new stuff is put into circularization, guess who gets it first? UK. They get the new Jordans 2 weeks before we do.
Well, that's not true.
It's true.
That's not true.
They watch the movies a week before we do.
That's not true.
That's true.
No.
It is very true.
Nope.
Mm-hmm.
Nope.
They get the new iPhone about a week before we do.
Sometimes. Usually that's the Asian countries.
We're like, we get the hand-me-downs. They're like, you guys just now finding about this shit? Sure. I done played that.
Well, that's not true. Some of the big blockbuster movies are not played in overseas until about a month after they're already here. Or they're here.
Why do you think most of the movies that come out, when you get them, they're already bootlegged from China and shit?
It's the way the world works, man.
Yep. Friedrich Engels, The Condition of the Working Class in England. That's what he wrote.
Apparently.
In 1844, he spoke of an industrial revolution. A revolution which at the same time changed the whole of civil society. Although Engels wrote his book in the 1840s, it was not translated into English until the late 19th century. There was one point in mind there. And his expression...
English, that doesn't mean Europe. Where's this guy from? It's got to be from...
England.
No.
Is that England?
English is Europe. Right. Or England. So he was German.
German, yeah. Although Engels wrote his book in the 1840s, it was not translated in English until the late 19th century. His expression did not enter everyday language until then. Credit for popularizing the term may be given to Arnold Toynbee, whose 1881 lectures gave a detailed account of the term. Economic historians and authors such as Mendels, Pomerantz, and Critt argue that we're supposed to know who these people are.
I guess.
First names. They all argue that proto-industrialization in parts of Europe, the Muslim world, Mughal India, and China, this created the social and economic conditions that led to the Industrial Revolution, thus causing the Great Divergence. Some historians, such as John Clapham and Nicholas Crafts, have argued that the economic and social changes occurred gradually and that the term revolution is a misnomer. Yeah, I'll see. This is still a subject of debate among some historians. Wouldn't a revolution be like quick? You know what I mean?
Well, at least
it took over 20
this revolution they're saying was 80 years or something.
80 years in the making.
I guess some requirements to be a revolution or industrial. 6 factors facilitated industrialization. One was high levels of agricultural productivity. You can see the article British Agricultural Revolution if you want. To provide excess manpower and food, a pool of managerial and entrepreneurial skills, available ports, rivers, canals, and roads to cheaply move raw materials and outputs,
right.
Natural resources such as coal, iron, natural resources. Wait a minute, what was that? Natural resources such as coal, which on our climate episode said that it was not natural, but hey, Wikipedia contradict themselves here.
Yep.
Coal, iron, waterfalls, political stability, and a legal system that supported business, and financial capital available to invest. Once industrialization began in Great Britain, new factors can be added, which is the eagerness of British entrepreneurs to export industrial expertise and the willingness to import the process. Because there was always something going on with British trades and exports and shit. Britain met the criteria and industrialized starting in the 18th century, and then it exported the process to Western Europe, especially Belgium, France, and German states in the early 19th century. The United States copied the British model in the early 19th century, and Japan copied the Western European models in the late 19th century.
Of course they did. Why wouldn't they, right? Let's take a look at some important technological developments. The commencement of the Industrial Revolution is closely linked to a small number of innovations, beginning in the second half 18th century. By the 1830s, the following gains had been made in important technologies.
You got to get those gains.
You got to get those gains. Textiles. Merchandise, cotton spinning powered by steam or water increased the output of a worker by a factor of around 5 hundo. Damn. The power loom increased the output of a worker by a factor of 40. The cotton gin increased productivity of removing seed from cotton by a factor of 50.
Damn.
Large gains in productivity also occurred in spinning and weaving of wool and linen, but they were not as great as in cotton. Steam power.
Still, you know how long it took to
You're getting shit out.
weave like a thread or something like that, dude?
Right. Okay. Now the importance of steam power. The efficiency of steam engines increased so that they used between 1/5 and 1/10 as much fuel. The adaptation of stationary steam engines to a rotary motion made them suitable for industrial uses.
Right.
The high-pressure engine had a high power-to-weight ratio, making it suitable for transportation. Steam power underwent a rapid expansion after 1800, which is, if you think about it, that guy who invented the car that ran off water. It's the same process.
Well, pretty much. You're just pressurizing the water into steam, and that's what's pushing the pistons.
So they didn't want this shit from way back in the day, even when cars first started. I think there was like steam-powered cars, weren't there?
Of course there was.
Yeah.
And France was the one that made the first cars, and they were steam-powered. Just they
didn't go very fast.
Not only that, they weren't reliable. What are you going to do in winter? It's true. You know, I mean.
Very true.
Also, iron making, the substitute.
If you can run on gas, why couldn't you do it with like antifreeze? I don't think you want to be
because antifreeze isn't combustible.
Burning antifreeze.
That's what the combustible engine is.
The nitrogen and
apparently, there's a thing called coke, which is a gray, hard, and porous coal-based fuel with high carbon content and few impurities, made by heating coal or oil in the absence of air.
Oh. Yeah, just like that's what they use for the trains.
Pure coke. Iron making. The substitution of coke for charcoal greatly lowered the fuel costs of pig iron and wrought iron production. Using coke also allowed larger blast furnaces, resulting in economies of scale. Steam engine began being used to power blast air indirectly by pumping water to a water wheel in the 1750s, enabling a large increase in iron production by overcoming the limitation of water power.
Damn right.
The cast iron blowing cylinder was first used in 1760. Really, cast iron?
Man.
It was later. When did the steel?
It had been for years.
Right. It was later improved by making it double acting, which allowed higher blast furnace temperatures. The puddling process produced a structural grade iron at a lower cost than the finery forge. The rolling mill was 15 times faster than hammering iron, obviously. Developed in 1822, hot blast greatly increased fuel efficiency and iron production in the following decades.
Oh, no shit.
Also, in the invention of machine tools, the first machine tools were invented, including the new screw cutting lathe.
No shit.
Oh, really? Yeah. So you're turning, and you can cut the
Right.
what are they called? The threads.
Right.
The cylinder boring machine and the milling machine. Machine tools made the economical manufacture of precision metal parts possible, although it took several decades to develop effective techniques.
Right, I mean, come on.
But still, imagine trying to cut threads like with a file. You're going to do that with one little screw when you can just put it on a lathe and it's just, you go,
Done.
Yeah.
Over.
I mean, Argo textile manufacturer, who cares?
Let's take a look at the British textile industry statistics. A hand loom weaving from William Hogarth's industry and idleness in 1747. What? That must have been a picture.
Must have been a picture.
In 1750, Britain imported 2.5 million pounds of raw cotton, most of which was spun and woven by the cottage industry in Lancashire.
Wait a minute.
Lancashire?
Britain was making cotton?
Yeah.
How?
Dude, that's where the stories of
Cotton doesn't grow in that.
Rapunzel and all that. Oh, that's
It was gold. She was weaving thread into gold or whatever.
Right.
But cotton doesn't grow in Britain, apparently. How? That's why the South was only growing it, not the North.
right.
Interesting.
Or maybe it was grown in like Portugal or something.
No, they imported,
Oh, right.
not exported. So yeah, they're taking in 2.5 million pounds.
Right. Yeah. Britain imported 2.5 million pounds of raw cotton, most of which was spun and woven by the cottage industry in Lancashire. The work was done by hand in workers' homes or occasionally in master weaver shops. Wages in Lancashire were about, if I'm saying that wrong, piss off, were about 6 times those in India in 1770, when overall productivity in Britain was about 3 times higher than in India. We just witnessed the mythical
the mythical American pit bull.
1787 raw cotton consumption was 22 million pounds, most of which was cleaned, carded, and spun on machines. The British
Dude, do you know how much cotton you have to have 22 million pounds of it?
a lot.
Holy shit.
A lot. Like as much weed.
Right.
The British textile industry used 52 million pounds of cotton in 1800, which increased to 588 million pounds in 1850.
Holy shit.
Holy
This is why slavery didn't want to go away. The share of value added by the cotton textile industry in Britain was 2.6% in 1760, 17% 1801, and 22.4% 1831.
Damn.
Value added by the British woolen industry was 14.1% in 1801 alone. Cotton factories in Britain numbered approximately 900 in 1797. 1760, approximately 1/3 of cotton cloth manufactured in Britain was exported, rising to 2/3 by 1800. In 1781, cotton spun amounted to 5.1 million pounds, which increased to 56 million pounds by 1800.
Holy shit.
20 years. In 1800, less than 0.1% of world cotton cloth was produced on machinery invented in Britain.
Oh,
That's
shit.
not a lot at all.
Right. Enough.
So, which means the rest of the world isn't industrialized yet. 1788, there were 50,000 spindles, Britain rising over 7 million in the next 30 years.
Damn. Let's take a look at wool. It was the earliest European attempts at mechanized spinning were with wool. However, wool spinning proved more difficult to mechanize than cotton.
Yeah, what you have in those old days, like the wood wheel that you like press with the pedal or something?
Forever. Productivity improvement in wool spinning during the Industrial Revolution was significant, but far less than that of cotton.
Okay.
Oh, that was just it for wool, huh?
Apparently.
I don't give a shit about wool. Silk. Probably silk too, though. Arguably the first highly mechanized factory was John Lamb's water-powered silk mill at Derby, wherever Derby's at. It was operational by 1721. Loam learned silk thread manufacturing by taking in a job in Italy and acting as an industrial spy. However, because the Italian silk industry guarded its secrets closely.
Yeah, man, ain't no silk like the Italian silk. That's where all the good clothes are made from.
You ain't kidding. The state of the industry at this time is unknown. Although Loam's factory was technically successful, the supply of raw silk from Italy was cut off to eliminate competition.
Hell yeah.
In order to promote manufacturing, the Crown paid for models of Loam's machinery, which were exhibited in the Tower of London.
Okay, well, I guess we're going to learn about cotton again when parts of India, China, Central America, South America, and the Middle East have a long history of hand manufacturing cotton textiles, which became a major industry sometimes after 1000 AD. In tropical and subtropical regions where it was grown, most was grown by small farmers alongside their food crops and was spun and woven in households, largely for domestic consumption.
Well, what else would it be for?
In the 15th century, China began to require households to pay part of their taxes in cotton cloth. Wow. By the 17th century, almost all Chinese wore cotton clothing. Ooh, it was hot. Mm-hmm. Almost everywhere, cotton cloth could be used as a medium of exchange, really. In India, a significant amount of cotton textiles were manufactured for distant markets, often produced by professional weavers. Some merchants also owned small weaving workshops. India produced a variety of cotton cloth, some of exceptionally fine quality.
Cotton was a difficult raw material for Europe to obtain before it was grown on colonial plantations in the Americas. Right. The early Spanish explorers found Native Americans growing unknown species of excellent quality cotton.
This is high quality cotton right here.
Sea island cotton and upland green seed cotton. That's what they were growing. Sea island cotton grew in tropical areas and on barrier islands of Georgia
What
and
is green seeded cotton? Is it a different color?
Yeah, it's that kind of cotton. Isn't that crazy?
That just grows.
Right.
That's stupid. Don't these have, it's a vulnerable thing too. Don't these have like sharp things in them or something?
They used to always have like bloody fingers and shit. Sea island cotton grew in tropical areas and on barrier islands of Georgia and South Carolina, but did poorly inland. Sea island cotton began being exported from Barbados in the 1650s. Upland green-seeded cotton grew well on inland areas of the southern U.S., but was not economical because of the difficulty removing seed.
Right.
A problem solved by the cotton gin.
Oh, thank you, Eli Whitney.
Yeah. A strain of cotton seed brought from Mexico to Natchez, Mississippi in 1806. It became the parent genetic material for over 90% of the world cotton production today. It's produced balls that were 3 to 4 times faster to pick.
Good for them. Trade in textiles section of this article. The Age of Discovery was followed by a period of colonialism in the beginning in the 16th century. Following the discovery of a trade route to India around southern Africa by the Portuguese, the British founded the East India Company, along with smaller companies of different nationalities, which established trading posts and employed agents to engage in trade throughout the Indian Ocean region. One of the largest segments of this trade was in cotton textiles, which were purchased in India and sold in Southeast Asia, including the Indonesian archipelago, where spices were purchased for sale to Southeast Asia and Europe. By the mid-1760s, cloth was over 3/4 of the East India Company's exports. Indian textiles were in demand in North Atlantic region of Europe, where previously only wool and linen were available. I know they got this cotton. They're like, why is it so soft?
Right.
However, the number of cotton goods consumed in Western Europe was minor until the early 19th century.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, screw that, dude.
That looks rough. By 1600, Flemish refugees began weaving cotton cloth. Began weaving cotton cloth in English towers. In English towns where
I was going to say towers. What are they all, Rapunzel? That's not Rapunzel. Right. Who's the one that Rumpelstiltskin?
Yeah, Rumpelstiltskin. Flemish refugees began weaving cotton cloth in English towns around 1600, where cottage spinning and weaving of wool and linen was well established already. They were left alone by the guilds, who did not consider cotton a threat. Earlier European attempts at cotton spinning and weaving were in 12th century Italy and 15th century southern Germany. But these industries eventually ended when the supply of cotton was cut off. The Moors in Spain grew, spun, and wove cotton beginning around the 10th century. British cloth could not compete with Indian cloth because India's labor cost was approximately 1/5 to 1/6 that of Britain's.
Yeah, but it was.
1700 and 1721. the British government passed Calico Acts to protect the domestic woolen and linen industries from the increasing amounts of cotton fabric imported from India.
The demand for heavier fabric was met by a domestic industry based around Lancashire that produced fustian, a cloth with flax warp and cotton weft. Okay. Flax was used for the warp because wheel-spun cotton did not have a sufficient strength, but the resultant blend was not as soft as 100% cotton. It was more difficult to sew.
Oh.
On the eve of the Industrial Revolution, there was like a day before, spinning and weaving were done in households for domestic consumption and as a cottage industry under the putting out system.
Okay.
Yeah, I got bitches over here all just putting out.
Right.
Means subcontracting work. I could just say that.
Just say that.
Occasionally, the work was done in the workshop of a master weaver. Under the putting out system, some
I
based
want to be a master weaver.
master weaver. So, under the putting out system, home-based workers produce under contract to merchant sellers who often supply the raw materials. In the off-season, the women, typically farmers' wives, did the spinning and the men did the weaving.
Makes sense.
Using the spinning wheel, it took anywhere from 4 to 8 spinners to supply one hand loom weaver.
That's ridiculous. Jeez. The invention of the textile machinery. The flying shuttle, patented in 1733 by John Kay, with a number of subsequent improvements, including an important one in 1747. It doubled the output of a weaver. What's it look like? Oh, ain't that nice?
Oh, it's that thing, right?
Yeah.
Where it like spins the thing. Yeah. Okay.
Exactly.
How easy is that? And they just now figured it out.
Right. Yeah, and it doubled the output of a weaver, worsening the imbalance between spinning and weaving. It became widely used around Lancashire after 1760 when John's son Robert invented the drop box.
Who the fuck is John?
Which
John Kay.
facilitated changing thread colors. Oh, isn't that awesome? Look at these guys. Lewis Paul patented the roller spinning frame and the flyer and bobbin system for drawing wool to a more even thickness.
Right, where the bobber goes up and down, so that way it's like when you're rolling up a hose, you want to get it even, you know?
Right. The technology was developed with the help of John Wyatt of Birmingham. Paul and Wyatt, they opened up a mill in Birmingham, which used a rolling machine powered by a donkey. 1743, a factory opened in Northampton with 50 spindles on each of 5 of Paul and Wyatt's machines. This operated until about 1746. A similar mill... 1764. A similar mill was built by Daniel Bourne in Leominster, but it burned down. Oh. Both Lewis Paul and Daniel Bourne patented carding machines in 1748. Based on 2 sets of rollers that traveled at different speeds, it was later used in the first cotton spinning mill. Look at that thing, dude.
That's a spinning jenny, which we'll hear about now. 1764, the village of Stanhill, Lancashire, James Hargreaves invented the spinning jenny, which he patented in 1770. It was the first practical spinning frame with multiple spindles.
Fantastic.
The jenny worked in a similar manner to the spinning wheel by first clamping down on the fibers, then by drawing them out, followed by twisting. It was a simple wooden frame machine that cost only about £6 for a 40 spindle model in 1792. That's still a lot of money, though.
That's a lot.
And used mainly by home spinners. The jenny produced a lightly twisted yarn only suitable for weft, not warp.
Oh.
The spinning frame or water frame was developed by Richard Arkwright, who, along with 2 partners, patented it in 1769.
Fantastic.
The design was partly based on a spinning machine built by Kay, who was hired by Arkwright.
Well, that makes sense. For each spindle, the water frame used a series of 4 pairs of rollers, each operating at successfully higher rotating speed to draw out the fiber, which was then twisted by the spindle. The roller spacing was slightly longer than the fiber length, obviously. To close a spacing caused the fibers to break, while too distant a spacing caused uneven thread. The top rollers were leather covered and loading on the rollers was applied by a weight. The weights kept the twist from backing up before the rollers. The bottom rollers were wood and metal, with fluting along the length. The water frame was able to produce a hard, medium count thread suitable for warp, finally allowing 100% cotton cloth to be made in Britain.
They're like, damn.
Arkwright and his partners used water power at a factory in Cromford, Derbyshire in 1771, giving the invention its name.
Good for them. Samuel Crompton's spinning mule which that's a hell of a contraption.
You can.
Was introduced in 1779. Mule implies a hybrid because it was a combination of the spinning jenny and the water frame.
Right.
Okay. Which the spindles were placed on a carriage, which then went through an operational sequence during which the roller stopped while the carriage moved away from the drawn roller to finish drawing out the fibers as the spindle started rotating.
Fantastic.
Crompton's mule was able to... This is supposed to be interesting, guys.
Right.
I spent 85 years on fucking thread. Crompton's mule was able to produce finer thread than hand spinning and at a lower cost.
Okay.
Mule spun thread was of suitable strength to be used as warp and finally allowed Britain to produce highly competitive yarn in large quantities.
Okay, now they're getting there, huh?
Right.
Realizing that the expiration of Arkwright patent would greatly increase the supply of spun cotton and lead to a shortage of weavers, Edmund Cartwright developed a vertical power loom, which he patented in 1785. 1776, he patented a two-man operated loom. Cartwright's loom design had several flaws, though, the most serious being thread breakage.
Yeah. I mean, doing it too fast or something?
Samuel Horrocks patented a fairly successful loom in 1813. Horrocks' loom was improved by Richard Roberts in 1822. And these were both produced in large numbers by Roberts, Hill, and Company.
Good for them. The demand for cotton presented an opportunity to planters in the southern United States who thought upland cotton would be a profitable crop if a better way could be found to remove the seed. Bring in Eli Whitney. He responds to the challenge by inventing the inexpensive cotton gin. A man using a cotton gin could remove seed from as much upland cotton in one day as would previously have taken 2 months to process, working at the rate of 1 pound of cotton per day. So it only took 1 pound of cotton per 2 months before. These advances were capitalized on by entrepreneurs, of whom the best known is Arkwright. He is credited with a list of inventions, but these were actually developed by such people as Kay and Thomas Hayes. But Arkwright nurtured the inventors, patented the ideas, financed the initiatives, and protected the machines.
Arkwright created the cotton mill, which brought the production processes together in a factory. And he developed the use of power, first horsepower, and then water power. Oh, and he developed the use of power. First he had horsepower, and then water power, which made cotton manufacture a mechanized industry. Other inventors increased the efficiency of the individual steps of spinning, carding, twisting, and spinning and rolling, so that the supply of yarn increased greatly. Steam power was then applied to drive textile machinery. Manchester acquired the nickname Cottonopolis during the early 19th century, owing to its sprawl of textile factories. Although mechanization dramatically decreased the cost of cotton cloth, by the mid-19th century, machine-woven cloth still could not equal the quality of hand-woven Indian cloth. Clearly not. In part because of the finesse of thread made possible by the type of cotton used in India, which allowed high thread counts. However, the highly productivity of the British textile manufacturing allowed coarser grades of cotton of British cloth to undersell hand-spun and woven fabric in low-wage India, eventually destroying the Indian industry.
Jeez.
I mean, we can get it for a lot cheaper.
Right. Doesn't matter, right?
Right.
All right. Now some good stuff. Moving on to the British iron production statistics. Why is it all British? Bar iron was a commodity form of iron used as a raw material for making hardware goods such as nails, wire, hinges, horseshoes, wagon tires, chains, etc., as well as structural shapes. Small amount of bar iron was converted into steel. Cast iron was used for pots, stoves, and other items where its brittleness was tolerable. Most cast iron was refined and converted to bar iron with substantial losses. Bar iron was made by the bloomery process, which was the predominant iron smelting process until the late 18th century.
No shit. In the UK in 1720, there were about 2,500 tons of cast iron produced with charcoal and 400 tons with coke. 1750, charcoal iron production was 24,500 and coke iron was 2,500 tons. Damn. Wow. 1788, the production of charcoal cast iron was 14,000 tons, while coke iron production was 54,000 tons. 1806, charcoal 1806, charcoal cast iron production was 7,800 tons, and coke was 250,000 tons.
Wow.
1750, the UK imported 31,200 tons of bar iron and either refined from cast iron or directly produced 18,800 tons of bar iron using charcoal and 100 tons of using coke. 1796, the UK was making 125,000 tons of bar iron with coke and 6,400 tons with charcoal. Imports were 38,000 tons and exports were 24,600. Damn, making some money.
All right.
1806, the UK did not import bar iron, but it exported 31,500 tons still.
Good for them. Huh? Well, iron process innovations. Major change to the iron industry during the Industrial Revolution was the replacement of wood and other biofuels with coal, which burns hotter and longer, right?
Yeah.
For a given amount of heat, mining coal required much less labor than cutting wood and converted it into charcoal, and coal was much more abundant than wood, supplies of which were becoming scarce after the enormous increase in iron production that took place in the 18th century.
Right.
By 1750, coke had generally replaced charcoal in the smelting of copper and lead and was in widespread use in glass production as well. In the smelting and refining of iron, coal and coke produced inferior iron that made with charcoal, or coal and coke produce inferior iron to that made of with charcoal because of the coal's sulfur content.
All right. Yeah, I got some sulfur in there. Man. Low sulfur coals were known, though, but they still contain harmful amounts. Conversion of coal to coke only slightly reduced the sulfur content. A minority of coals are coking. All right. Okay. Another factor limiting the iron industry before the Industrial Revolution was the scarcity of water power to power blast bellows. This limitation was overcome by the steam engine, thankfully. Use of coal and iron smelting started somewhat before the Industrial Revolution, based on innovations by Clement Clerk and others from 1678, using coal reverberatory furnaces known as cupolas. These were operated by flames playing on the ore and charcoal or coke mixture, reducing the oxide to the metal. This has the advantage that impurities such as sulfur ash in the coal do not migrate into the metal. Oh, that's nice.
All right. This technology was applied to lead from 1678 and to copper from 1687. It was also applied to iron foundry work in the 1690s, but in this case, the reverberatory furnace was known as an air furnace. The foundry cupola is a different and later innovation. By 1709, Abraham Darby made progress using coke to fuel his blast furnaces at Coalbrookdale. However, the coke pig iron he made was not suitable for making raw iron and was used mostly for the production of cast iron goods, such as pots and kettles. He had the advantage over his rivals in that his pots, cast by his patented process, were thinner and cheaper than theirs. My pots are thinner and cheaper than yours.
Coke pig iron was hardly used to produce wrought iron until 1755 or around 1756, when Darby's son Abraham Darby II built furnaces at Horshey and Ketley, where low sulfur coal was available, and not far from Coalbrookdale. These furnaces were equipped with water-powered bellows, the water being pumped by Newcomen steam engines. The Newcomen engines were not attached directly to the blowing cylinders because the engines alone could not produce a steady air blast. Abraham Darby III, hey, look at these guys, instilled similar steam-pumped water-powered blowing cylinders at the Dale Company when he took control in 1768. The Dale Company used several Newcomen engines to drain its mines and made parts for engines, which is sold throughout the very country of
Britain.
Right.
Steam engines made the use of higher pressure and volume blast practical. However, the leather used in bellows was expensive to replace. 1757, Iron Master John Wilkinson patented a hydraulic-powered blowing engine for blast furnaces. The blowing cylinder for blast furnaces was introduced in 1760, and the first blowing cylinder made of cast iron is believed to be one used at Carrington in 1768 that was designed by John Schmeaton. Cast iron cylinders for use with the piston were difficult to manufacture. The cylinders had to be free of holes and had to be machined smooth and straight to remove any warping. James Watt had great difficulty trying to have a cylinder made for his first steam engine. 1776, Wilkinson invented a precision boring machine for boring cylinders.
After Wilkinson bored the first successful cylinder for a Boulton Watt steam engine in 1776, he was given an exclusive contract for providing cylinders.
Good for him, dude.
After Watt developed a rotary steam engine in 1782, they were widely applied to blowing, hammering, and rolling and slitting. The solutions to the sulfur problem were the addition of sufficient limestone to the furnace to force sulfur into the slag, as well as the use of low sulfur coal.
Okay.
The use of lime or limestone required higher furnace temperatures to form a free-flowing slag. The increased furnace temperature, made possible by improved blowing, also increased the capacity of blast furnaces and allowed for the increased furnace height.
All right. Well, in addition,
bigger furnaces.
Right. In addition to lower costs and greater availability, Coke had other important advantages over charcoal, and that was harder and made the column of materials, such as iron ore, fuel, slag, flowing down the blast furnace more porous and did not crush in the much taller furnaces of the late 19th century. As cast iron became cheaper and widely available, it began being a structural material for bridges and buildings. A famous early example is the Iron Bridge, built in 1778 with cast iron produced by Abraham Darby III. However, most cast iron was converted into wrought iron. Conversion of cast iron had long been done in a finery forge. An improved refining process known as potting and stamping was developed, but this was superseded by Henry Cort's puddling process. Cort developed two significant iron manufacturing processes. One was rolling in 1783 and puddling in 1784. Puddling produced a structural grade iron at a relatively low cost.
No shit.
What is puddling? Yeah, you puddle it and then you roll it out.
Right.
Right, between two rolls, so that way that thick-ass thing can become like this thin, and you get that thing, yeah. You're going to get like 8 times of the fucking things that you would get.
It took them 8,000 years.
Right, it only took them 8,000 years to get this shit.
Puddling was a means of decarburizing molten pig iron by slow oxidation into a reverberatory furnace by manually stirring it with a long rod. The decarburized iron, having a higher melting point than cast iron, was raked into globs by the puddler. I want to be a puddler. When the glob was large enough, the puddler would remove it. Puddling was backbreaking and extremely hot work.
No, you don't.
Few puddlers lived to be 40 years old.
Well, they're also got to consider the times.
Holy shit. Because puddling was done in a reverberatory furnace, coal or coke could be used as fuel. The puddling process continued to be used until the late 19th century, when iron was, who would you want to hire? And they know they're going to die by 40.
They also know they're rolling in some bank, though.
Right.
I got to provide for my family.
Right. The puddling process continued to be used until the late 19th century, when iron was being displaced by steel.
Yeah.
Because puddling required human skill in sensing the iron globs, it was never successfully mechanized.
All right. Well, rolling was an important part of the puddling process because the grooved rollers expelled most of the molten slag and consolidated the mass of hot raw iron.
Oh, shit.
Rolling was 15 times faster at this than a trip hammer. Right. Before, because, to make the, get most of it, you had to just have that shit's like red hot molten. Yeah. A different use of rolling, which was done at lower temperatures than that for expelling slag, was in the production of iron sheets and later structural shapes such as beams, angles, rails. The puddling process was improved in 1818 by Baldwin Rogers, who replaced some of the sand lining on the reverberatory furnace bottom with iron oxide.
Oh.
1938, John Hall patented the use of a roasted tap cinder or iron silicate for the furnace bottom, greatly reducing the loss of iron through increased slag caused by a sand-lined bottom.
Okay. Makes sense. The tap cinder also tied up some phosphorus, but this was not understood at the time. Hall's process was use iron scale or rust, which reacted with carbon in the molten iron. Hall's process, called wet puddling, reduced losses of iron with the slag from almost 50% to around 8%.
Oh.
Damn, that's hella. Puddling became widely used after the 1800 year, but at this very time, British iron manufacturers had used considerable amounts of iron imported from Sweden and Russia to supplement domestic supplies. Because of the increased British production, imports began to decline in 1785, and by the 1790s, Britain eliminated imports and became a net exporter of bar iron.
Look at these guys. Well, hot blast, patented by Scottish inventor James Beaumont Nielsen in 1828, was the most important development of the 19th century for saving energy and making pig iron. By using preheated combustion air, the amount of fuel to make a unit of pig iron was reduced at first by between 1/3 using coke or 2/3 using coal. The efficiency gains continued as the technology improved. Hot blasts also raised the operating temperature of the furnaces, increasing their capacity.
Damn right.
Using less coal or coke meant introducing fewer impurities into the pig iron. This meant that lower quality coal could be used in areas where coke and coal was unavailable or too expensive.
Look at that shit.
However, by the end of the 19th century, transportation costs fell considerably anyway, so it didn't really matter at that
Yeah,
time.
you can do what you want. Shortly before the Industrial Revolution, an improvement was made in the production of steel, which was an expensive commodity, and it used only where iron would not do, such as for cutting-edge tools and for springs.
Yeah, you can't have no iron springs.
No. Benjamin Huntsman developed his crucible steel technique in the 1740s. The raw material for this was blister steel, made by the cementation process. The supply of cheaper iron and steel aided a number of industries, such as those making nails, hinges, wire, and other hardware items. The development of machine tools allowed better working of iron, causing it to be increasingly used in the rapidly growing machinery and engine industries.
Okay, now we're going to take a look at steam power. How'd that do? The development of the stationary steam engine was an important element of the Industrial Revolution. However, during the early period of the Industrial Revolution, most industrial power was supplied by water and wind. In Britain, by 1800, an estimated 10,000 horsepower was being supplied by steam.
Damn.
By 1815, steam power had grown to 210,000 horsepower.
Holy shit.
The first commercially successful industrial use of steam power was patented by Thomas Savery in 1698. He constructed in London a low-lift combined vacuum and pressure water pump that generated about 1 horsepower and was used in numerous waterworks and in a few mines, hence its brand name, the Miner's Friend. Savery's pump was economical in small horsepower ranges, but was prone to boiler explosions in larger sizes. Yeah, you want to be around those. You don't mind me in the way when my boiler explodes. Dead. Savory pumps continued to be produced until the late 18th century.
Well, ain't that fantastic?
The first successful piston steam engine was introduced by Thomas Newcomen before 1712. His engines were installed for draining hitherto unworkable deep mines. With the engine on the surface, these were large machines requiring a significant amount of capital to build and produce upwards of 3.5 kilowatts, gigawatts?
5 horsepower.
5 horsepower. They were also used to power municipal water supply pumps.
Fantastic.
They were extremely inefficient by modern standards, but when located where coal was cheap at pit heads, they opened up a great expansion in coal mining by allowing mines to go deeper.
Okay, whatever, right. Despite their disadvantages, Newcomen engines were reliable and easy to maintain. Continued to be used in the coal fields until the oily decades of the 19th century. I mean, if it's easy to maintain and they're reliable, bud, they don't care.
Why change it, right? Unless you get something that's just as easily to maintain, reliable, and faster.
Right. By 1729, when Newcomen died, his engines had spread to Hungary in 1722, firstly, and then to Germany, which is basically the same thing, and then Austria, and then Sweden. A total of 110 were known to have been built by 1733 when the joint patent expired, of which 14 were abroad. In 1770s, the engineer John Smeaton, he built some very large examples and introduced a number of improvements. A total of 1,454 engines had been built by the 1800. Mm-hmm. What's that look like there? Oh, yeah, it's like an oil thing.
Kind of.
Nice.
Fundamental change in working principles was brought about by Scotsman James Watt. With financial support from his business partner, Englishman Matthew Boulton, he had succeeded by 1778 in perfecting his steam engine, which incorporated a series of radical improvements, notably the closing off of the upper part of the cylinder, therefore making the low-pressure steam drive the top of the piston instead of the atmosphere. Use of a steam jacket, and the celebrated separate steam condenser chamber. The separate condenser did away with the cooling water that had been injected directly into the cylinder, which cooled the cylinder and wasted steam.
Likewise, the steam jacket kept steam from condensing into the cylinder, also improving efficiency. Well, yeah. These improvements increased engine efficiency so that Boulton and Watt's engines use only 20 to 25% as much coal per horsepower hour as Newcomen's. Boulton and Watt's, they opened up the Soho foundry for the manufacture of such engines in 1795. By 1783, the Watt steam engine had been fully developed into a double-acting rotative type, which meant that it could be used to directly drive the rotary machinery of a factory or mill. Both of Watt's basic engine types were commercially very successful, and by the year 1800, the firm Boulton and Watt had constructed 496 engines, with 164 driving reciprocating pumps, 24 serving blast furnaces, and 308 powering mill machinery. Most of the engines generated from 3.5 to 7.5 kilowatts, which are 5 to 10 horsepower.
All right. Till about 1800, the most common pattern of steam engine was the beam engine, built as an integral part of a stone or brick engine house, but soon various patterns of self-contained rotative engines, which were readily removable but not on wheels, were developed, such as the table engine. Around the start of the 19th century, at which time the Boulton and Watt patent expired, the Cornish engineer Richard Trevithick and the American Oliver Evans began to see how much easier that is.
Right.
Jeez, begin to construct higher pressure non-condensing steam engines, exhausting against the atmosphere.
Okay.
High pressure yielded an engine and boiler compact enough to be used on mobile road and rail locomotives and steamboats.
Damn right.
Small industrial power requirements continue to be provided by animal and human muscle until widespread electrification in the 20th century.
I mean, you always have the animal power.
These included crank-powered, treadle-powered, and horse-powered workshop and light industrial machinery.
Pre-industrial machinery was built by various craftsmen. Millwrights built water mills and windmills. Carpenters made wooden framing. Smiths and turners made metal parts, obviously. Wooden components had the disadvantage of changing dimensions with temperature and humidity. And the various joints tended to rack, which would work loose over time. Yeah, that's wood for you. As the Industrial Revolution progressed, machines with metal parts and frames became more common. Other important uses of metal parts were in firearms and threaded fasteners, such as machine screws, bolts, and nuts. There was also the need for precision in making parts. Precision also allowed better working machinery, interchangeability of parts, and standardization of threaded fasteners.
Right, because how many guys were doing wood? And none of that shit. If you needed a replacement part, you almost had to get it made.
Yep.
The demand for metal parts led to the development of several machine tools, clearly. They have their origins in the tools developed in the 18th century by makers of clocks and watches and scientific instrument makers to enable them to batch produce small mechanisms.
Cool.
Before the advent of machine tools, metal was worked manually using the basic hand tools of hammers, files, scrapers, saws, and chisels.
Yeah, that's some rough work there.
Yeah. Consequently, the use of metal machine parts was kept to a minimum. Hand methods of production were laborious and costly, and precision was difficult to achieve.
You ain't kidding. Man.
Yeah, you got to be like 40 years and dead sober, no shaker, nothing in your hands.
Man, the first large precision machine tool was a cylinder boring machine invented by John Wilkinson in 1774. It was used for the boring of the large diameter cylinders on early steam engines. Wilkinson's boring machine differed from the earlier cantilevered machines used for boring cannon in that the cutting tool was mounted on a beam that ran through the cylinder being bored and was supported outside on both ends, which makes sense. The planing machine, the milling machine, and the shaping machine were developed in the early decades of the 19th century. That late. Although the milling machine was invented at this time, it was not developed as a serious workshop tool until somewhat later in the 19th century.
Oh, Henry Maudslay, who trained a school of machine tool makers early in the 19th century, was a mechanic with superior ability who had been employed at the Royal Arsenal in Woolwich. He worked as an apprentice at the Royal Arsenal under Jan Verbruggen. In 1774, Verbruggen had installed a horizontal boring machine, which was the first industrial-sized lathe in the UK. Maudslay was hired away by Joseph Brahma for the production of high-security metal locks that required precision craftsmanship.
Nice.
Brahma patented a lathe that had similarities to the slide rest lathe. Maudslay perfected the slide rest lathe, which could cut machine screws of different thread pitches by using changeable gears between the spindle and the lead screw. Or lead screw. Before its invention, screws could not be cut to any precision using various earlier lathe designs, some of which copied from a template. Right. It's one size, that's it.
Yeah, that's it. The slide rest lathe was called one of the history's most important inventions, although it was not entirely Maudslay's idea. He was the first person to build a functional lathe using a combination of known innovations of the lead screw, slide rest, and the change gears. Cool. Maudslay left Brahma's employment and set up his own shop. He's like, I can do this shit myself.
I don't need you no more, Brahma.
He was engaged to build a machinery for making chips pulley blocks for the Royal Navy. Oh, look at that. And the Portsmouth block mills. That's cool. These machines were all metal and were the first machines for mass production and making components with a degree of interchangeability. The lessons Maudslay learned about the need for stability and precision, he adapted to the development of machine tools, and his workshops, he trained a generation of men to build on his work, such as Richard Roberts, Joseph Clement, and Joseph Whitworth.
All right, look at those guys. Must be famous guys. What did Roberts do? He was a pattern maker and engineer whose development of high-precision machine tools. Okay. Clement, engineer, chiefly remembered as the maker of Charles Babbage's first difference engine. He devised the British standard Whitworth system, which created an accepted standard for screw threads.
Yeah, nice.
Good for him, huh? All important guys, I guess. James Fox of Derby had a healthy export trade in machine tools for the first part of the 19th century, as did Matthew Murray of Leeds. Roberts was a maker of high-quality machine tools and a pioneer of the use of jigs and gauges for precision workshop measurement. The techniques to make this mass-produced metal parts made with sufficient precision to be interchangeable is largely attributed to a program of the U.S. Department of War, which perfected interchangeable parts for firearms in the early 19th century. In the half-century following the invention of the fundamental machine tools, the machine industry became the largest industrial sector of the U.S. economy by value added.
Look at that shit.
I bet it did.
Let's take a look at the chemicals that are involved. The large-scale production of chemicals was an important development during the Industrial Revolution. The first of these was production of sulfuric acid by the lead chamber process invented by the Englishman John Roebuck.
What was that? Sears and Roebuck?
This was that Watts guy's first partner that we were talking about before. Cool. That happened in 1746. He was able to greatly increase the scale of the manufacture by replacing the relatively expensive glass vessels formerly used with larger, less expensive chambers made of riveted sheets of lead. Instead of making a small amount each time, he was able to make around 50 kilograms, which are about 100 pounds, exactly 100 pounds, in each of the chambers, at least a tenfold increase. Damn.
Production of an alkali on a large scale became an important goal as well, and Nicolas Leblanc succeeded in 1791 in introducing a method
like stuff they put in batteries
for the production of sodium carbonate, which is soda ash. The Leblanc process was a reaction of sulfuric acid with sodium chloride to give sodium sulfate and hydrochloric acid. The sodium sulfate was heated with calcium carbonate and coal to give a mixture of sodium carbonate and calcium sulfide. Adding water separated the soluble sodium carbonate from the calcium sulfide. The process produced a large amount of pollution.
Oh, no.
The hydrochloric acid was initially vented to the atmosphere, and calcium sulfide was a waste product.
All right, yeah, so it's just garbage. Nonetheless, this synthetic soda ash proved economical compared to that produced from burning specific plants, such as barilla or kelp, which were the previously dominant source of soda ash. And also to potash, which is potassium carbonate, that was produced from hardwood ashes. These two chemicals were very important because they enabled the introduction of a host of other inventions, replacing many small-scale operations with more cost-effective and controllable processes. Sodium carbonate had many uses in the glass, textile, soap, and paper industries. Early uses for sulfuric acids included pickling, which was removing rust from iron and steel, and not pickling not pickling not pickling your dills. That's removed rust from iron and steel, and they also for bleaching clothes
or cloth.
No, same thing.
Development of bleaching powder, which is calcium hypochlorite, by Scottish chemist Charles Tennant in about 1800, based on the discoveries of French chemist Claude Louis Berthollet, revolutionized the bleaching processes in the textile industry by dramatically reducing the time required from months to days for the traditional process then in use, which required repeated exposure to the sun in bleach fields after soaking the textiles with alkali or sour milk. Really? Tennant's factory at St. Rollick's Glasgow became the largest chemical plant in the world.
No shit.
After about 1860, the focus on chemical innovation was in dyestuffs, and Germany took world leadership building a strong chemical industry. Aspiring chemists flocked to German universities in the between 1860 and 1914 era to learn the latest techniques.
I wonder why these guys were trying to take over the world.
And I wonder why all of the people that helped us build the A-bomb were German.
Right.
Seriously.
Maybe that's why we're like, we won't use it on you, we use it on the Japs. How about that? Yeah, all right.
British scientists Einstein was German. British scientists, by contrast, lacked research universities and did not train advanced students. Instead, the practice was to hire German-trained chemists.
Damn right. Oh, moving on. The concrete. This ought to be interesting.
Well, it's one paragraph.
Nice. In 1824, Joseph Aspdin, a British bricklayer turned builder, patented a chemical process for making Portland cement, which was an important advance in the building trades. The process involves sintering a mixture of clay and limestone to about 1,400 degrees Celsius, which is 2,552 degrees Fahrenheit. Then grind it into fine powder, which is then mixed with water, sand, and gravel to produce concrete. I mean, that's how did he even think of that?
Right, dude. Like, he just grabbed some clay and some limestone
and put them together.
Started grinding it, and then he accidentally got it wet, and he was like, and then it hardened or something.
Right,
the next day, and
it's
like,
even stronger.
Right.
This is even stronger. Portland cement concrete was used by the English engineer Mark Isambard Brunel several years later when constructing the Thames Tunnel, which is still there today, isn't it?
It's the Times.
Yeah, the Thames Tunnel.
I don't know. Is it? I don't know what that is. It says, it's a tunnel beneath the River Thames in London.
It's beneath it?
Beneath it. Yep.
Oh, shit.
Yeah, because they need to connect the north and south banks.
Right. Concrete was used on a large scale in the construction of the London sewer system a generation later, too. And all that shit's still there, man. Some good concrete.
Lots of stuff from concrete is still here.
Sometimes.
It's only 1824.
Sometimes.
Now to gaslighting. No, no, no. Not that kind of gaslighting.
We're not talking about climate change anymore.
Right. Though others made a similar innovation elsewhere, the large-scale introduction of gas lighting was the work of William Murdoch. Why do I know that name?
Sounds familiar.
An employee of Bolton and Watt.
That's why.
No, William Murdoch. Isn't there a Murdoch person in today's world? What's his name?
There's a wrestler.
No, William Murdoch. He's a bad guy. He's like a politician guy.
Today?
Right? Or like a billionaire guy or
Right
something
now?
like that. Yeah.
Right now?
Yes.
I don't think so.
Yes, dude. Murdoch. His name comes up like all the time.
The Murdoch Mysteries.
Rupert Murdoch. Yeah. $21.7 billion. 31 richest person. And he doesn't do very good things. Whenever you see the word business magnate and media proprietor, yeah.
Right. And Australian.
Right. The process consisted of the large-scale gasification of coal and furnaces, the purification of the gas, which was removal of sulfur, ammonia, and heavy hydrocarbons, and its storage and distribution. First gas lighting utilities were established in London between 1812 and 1820. They soon became one of the major consumers of coal in the UK. Gas lighting affected social and industrial organization because it allowed factories and stores to remain open longer than with tallow candles or oil lamps.
Yeah, I was watching this old house not too long ago, and these people bought this old, like, factory type. It was like a little mill thing they turned into a house, and they had on the old days used to have the old porch lights that were gas that came from the city. It was like constantly on all the time,
or when it turned dark, right?
Right, but yeah, I think you still had to go out there and light them. Or some shit. I forget.
Right, there was probably like a
little knob.
to turn them
Yeah,
on.
a little knob. And then the guys get in there and they replaced the whole, put the new lights on there and shit. That was pretty cool, man. That's probably what
Did
they're
they
talking.
keep it?
Yeah, they got new ones.
I'll tell you, why wouldn't you?
Yeah, it was pretty sweet.
Yeah, but it was. Was it in Britain?
No, it was in Boston.
Well, of course. Its introduction allowed the nightlife to flourish in cities and towns as interiors and streets could be lighted on a larger scale than ever before.
Right.
There you go, man.
Yeah, the Ripper didn't like that.
Right. That's why he stuck to the back.
Right. Glass was made in ancient Greece and Rome.
Well, we're on the glass now, by the way.
Oh, I guess we're moving to glass making, which was made in ancient Greece and Rome. A new method of glass production known as the cylinder process was developed in Europe during the early 19th century. 1832, this process was used by Chance Brothers to create sheet glass. They became the leading producers of window and plate glass.
Dude, yeah, glass has been around forever.
This advancement allowed for more panes of glass to be created. I wonder how they figure out how to do that.
Larger.
Right. This advancement allowed for larger panes of glass to be created without interruption, thus freeing up the space planning and interiors as well as the fenestration of buildings.
Well, that's how they figured it out. They're like, we're tired of fucking building window encasements every 2 feet.
Right.
We got to figure out a way to make a bigger window so we don't have to do this shit.
Gotcha, bud.
Right.
The Crystal Palace is the supreme example of the use of sheet glass in a new and innovative structure.
Moving on to paper machine. A machine for making a continuous sheet of paper on a loop of wire fabric was patented in 1798 by Louis Nicolas Robert in France. The paper machine is known as a Fourdrinier after the financiers, brothers Seeley and Henry Fourdrinier, who were stationers in London. Although greatly improved and with many variations, the Fourdrinier machine is the predominant means of paper production in today.
Oh, wow.
The method of continuous production demonstrated by the paper machine influenced the development of continuous rolling of iron and later steel and other continuous production processes. Right.
Look at that shit. All right, let's see what that has to do with the Industrial Revolution. The British Agricultural Revolution is considered one of the causes of the Industrial Revolution because improved agricultural productivity freed up workers to work in other sectors of the economy.
Right. See, they were taking this time, like, how do we get this agriculture shit rolling?
They're like, I've been trying to finish this puzzle for 35 years.
Like, I've been tilling this field for 25 years.
Right.
And I've never even grew anything because all I've been doing is tilling.
Right. And now I can do other things.
Right.
In contrast, per capita food supply in Europe was stagnant or declining and did not improve in some parts of Europe until the late 18th century.
Why?
English lawyer Jethro Tull. Yeah.
I didn't realize that was a real guy.
Right. The English lawyer Jethro Tull invented an improved seed drill in 1701. It was a mechanical seeder that distributed seeds evenly across a plot of land and planted them at the correct depth.
Damn.
Fantastic. It was more important because the yield of seeds harvested to seeds planted at the time was around 4 or 5. Wow.
Yield of seeds harvested. The seed, right. So you're gathering up all these seeds, but none of them are getting planted.
Tolled seed drill was very expensive and not very reliable, and therefore did not have much of an effect. Good quality seed drills were not produced until the mid-18th century. All right.
Okay, fuck you then, Jethro Tull.
Right.
Joseph Foljambe's Rotherham plow of 1730 was the first commercially successful iron plow.
Nice.
The threshing machine, invented by the Scottish engineer Andrew Meekley, 1784, displaced hand threshing with a flail, which was a laborious job that took about 1/4 of agricultural labor. Wow.
Right.
Lower labor requirements subsequently resulted in lowered wages and numbers of farm laborers who faced near starvation, leading to the 1830 agricultural rebellion of the swing riots.
I mean, it happens.
It's not your fault, guys.
Right.
Go do something else.
Right.
Machine tools and metalworking techniques developed during the Industrial Revolution eventually resulted in precision manufacturing techniques in the late 19th century for mass-producing agricultural equipment such as reapers, binders, and combine harvesters.
Yeah, by 1880, dude, they're doing some shit.
International Harvester.
All right, check out mining. Coal mining in Britain, particularly in South Wales, it started very oily. Before the steam engine, pits were often shallow bell pits following a seam of coal along the surface, which were abandoned as the coal was extracted. In other cases, if the geology was favorable, the coal was mined by means of an adit or drift mine driven into the side of the hill. Shaft mining was done in some areas, but the limiting factor was a problem removing water.
Right, you know, pumps to pump that shit out.
It could be done by hauling buckets of water up the shaft or to a sow, which is a tunnel driven into a hill to drain a mine. In either case, the water had to be discharged into a stream or a ditch at a level where it could flow away by gravity and not come back in.
Right. Yeah, you got a mine full of people and just rush of water comes in.
Right, that would suck.
Speaking of rush of water, I randomly...
Russia water?
rush of water. Randomly watched, it was like an hour-long compilation of the Japan earthquake and tsunamis. Holy shit, dude.
Yeah.
Like, these people would film the big-ass wave, like, 2 miles out at sea, and literally within 2 minutes, it's the whole town's underwater.
Dumb.
Buildings are just fucking destroyed, moved, and it's just, like, rushing like it rapids, dude.
Ridiculous.
Stupid.
Dumb.
Water. And it was like, there'd be like a row of cars, and literally the water was only like this deep, dude. Like maybe a half a foot, and it's moving these vehicles out of the way. That's how fucking powerful water is.
Water's strong.
Stupid.
Very strong.
Yeah, very strong it is. The introduction of the steam pump by Thomas Savery in 1698 and the new common steam engine in 1712 greatly facilitated the removal of water and enabled shafts to be made deeper, enabling more coal to be extracted.
Damn
obviously.
right.
These were developments that had begun before the Industrial Revolution, but the adoption of John Smeaton's improvements to the new common engine, followed by James Watt's more efficient steam engines from the 1770s, reduced the fuel costs, making mines more profitable.
Damn right.
The Cornish engine, developed in the 1810s, was much more efficient than the Watt steam engine.
I'm sure it was. I mean, it was a new addition.
Right.
Coal mining was very dangerous, owing to the presence of fire damp and many coal seams. Yeah. Some degree of safety was provided by the safety lamp, which was invented in 1816 by Sir Humphrey Davy and independently by George Stephenson. However, the lamps proved a false dawn because they became unsafe very quickly and provided a weak light. Fire damp explosions continued, often setting off coal dust explosions, so casualties grew during the entire 19th century. Conditions of work were very, 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 very poor, with high casualty rates from rock falls. Yeah, that would suck.
Well, moves to transportation. This should be a big one. Nope. That's literally one paragraph. Well, you can also go look at the main article, which is transport during the British Industrial Revolution. You can also see productivity improving technologies, economic history, infrastructures. At the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, inland transport was navigable by rivers and roads, which, with coastal vessels, right, employed to move heavy goods by sea, right. Wagonways were used for conveying coal to rivers and further shipment, but canals had not been widely constructed yet.
Right.
Animals supplied all of the motive power on land, with sails providing the motive power on the sea. First horse railways were introduced toward the end of the 18th century, with steam locomotives being introduced in the early decades of the 19th century.
All right.
Improving sailing technologies boosted average sailing speed by 50% between 1750 and 1830. The Industrial Revolution improved Britain's transport infrastructure with a turnpike road network, a canal and waterway network, and a railway network. Raw materials and finished products can be moved more quickly and cheaply than ever before, which improved transportation. Also allowed new ideas to spread quickly.
I mean, it makes sense. Okay, moving on to the canals and improvised waterways.
Or improved.
Waterways, is that?
Improved waterways. I don't know how you improvise a waterway.
Before and during the Industrial Revolution, navigation on several British rivers was improved by removing obstructions, straightening curves, widening and deepening, and building navigation locks. Britain had over 1,000 miles of navigable rivers and streams by 1750.
That's a lot.
Canals and waterways allowed bulk materials to be economically transported long distances inland. This was because a horse could pull a barge with a load dozens of times larger than the load that could be drawn in a cart.
Wow. So they put obviously the barges in the water, and they got like the horse walking next to the water.
Dude, that makes sense.
That would be all.
You don't need that much.
Well, right.
There's enough.
It's just pulling it from in the water.
Right.
Canals began to be built in the UK in the late 18th century to link the major manufacturing centers across the country. Known for its huge commercial success, the Bridgewater Canal in northwest England, which opened in 1761 and was mostly funded by the 3rd Duke of Bridgewater. From Worsley to the rapidly growing town of Manchester, its construction cost
Oh, shit.
£168,000, which is $22 million about in 2013.
Damn.
But its advantages over land and river transport meant that within a year of its opening in 1761, the price of coal in Manchester fell about half.
Well, obviously.
Success helped inspire a period of intense canal building known as Canal Mania. Brother, what you gonna do when these canals come flowing on you? Canals were hastily built with the aim of replicating the commercial success of the Bridgewater Canal, the most notable being the Leeds and Liverpool Canal and the Thames and Severn Canal, which opened in 1774 and 89 respectively. Okay, you guys weren't the only ones building canals, guys. There's canals in fucking ancient Egypt and shit.
By the 1820s, the national network was in existence. Canal construction served as a model for the organization and methods later used to construct railways. They were eventually largely superseded as profitable commercial enterprises by the spread of the railways from the 1840s on.
I would assume.
The last major canal to be built in the United Kingdom was the Manchester Ship Canal, which opened 1894. It was the largest ship canal in the world, and it opened to Manchester as a port. Oh, look at that. That was very well needed.
Yeah.
However, it has never achieved the commercial success and sponsors that sponsors had hoped for, and signal canals as a dying mode of transport in an age dominated by railways, which were quicker and often cheaper. Canals only work like to go from sea to sea, like the Panama
Or the Erie.
instead of going all the way down.
Well, obviously.
Around South America, you can just slip in through here.
Yeah, ask Grant about canals.
Right. Britain's canal network, together with the surviving mill buildings, is one of the most enduring features of the early Industrial Revolution to be seen in old Britain. It's like talking about Britain.
Well, I know. What the hell? Well, they did everything first, apparently.
I guess.
Which leads us to roads.
The roads, where we're going.
We need them.
We need roads.
France was known for having an excellent system of roads at the time of the Industrial Revolution. However, most of the roads on the European continent and in the UK were in bad condition and dangerously rutted.
Yeah, they're bad.
Much of the, because you would know. Yeah, I went over there once. I had you know how many wagon tongues I went to? Much of the original British road system was poorly maintained by thousands of local parishes, but from the 1720s and occasionally earlier, turnpike trusts were set up to charge tolls and maintain some roads. Obviously, increasing numbers of main roads were turnpiked from the 1750s to the extent that almost every main road in England and Wales was the responsibility of a turnpike trust.
Hey.
New engineered roads were built by John Metcalfe, Thomas Telford, and most notably John McAdam, with the first McAdam stretch of road being Marsh Road at Ashton Gate in Bristol, 1816. Okay. The first McAdam Road in the U.S. was the Boonesboro Turnpike Road between Hagerstown and Boonesboro, Maryland in 1823.
Oh, that's fantastic.
What is a McAdam?
It's a paved road.
Section of the breaking stones was not to exceed 6 ounces in weight or to pass 2-inch ring.
Right.
So it's stones.
Low.
It's crushed stones.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's stupid.
The major turnpikes radiated from London and were the means by which the Royal Mail was able to reach the rest of the country. Heavy goods transport on these roads was by means of slow, you can go very fast, broad-wheeled carts hauled by team of horses. Lighter goods were conveyed by smaller carts or by teams of pack horse. Stagecoaches carried the rich, and the less wealthy could pay to ride on carriers' carts. Productivity of road transport increased greatly during the Industrial Revolution, and the cost of travel fell dramatically. Between 1690 and 1840, productivity almost tripled for long-distance carrying and increasing fourfold in stagecoaching.
All right, moving on to railroads. Railways were made practical by the widespread introduction of inexpensive puddled iron after 1800, a rolling mill for making rails, and the development of the high-pressure steam engine also around 1800. Reducing friction was one of the major reasons for the success of the railroads compared to wagons. This was demonstrated on an iron plate-covered wooden tramway in 1805 at Croydon, London, or England. A good horse on an ordinary turnpike road can draw 2,000 pounds or 1 ton. A party of gentlemen were invited to witness the experiment, that the superiority of the new road might be established by ocular demonstration. 12 wagons were loaded with stones till each wagon weighed 3 tons and the wagons were fastened together.
Then a single horse was attached, which drew the wagons with ease, 6 miles in 2 hours. Damn. Having stopped 4 times in order to show he had the power of starting as well as drawing his great load. Wagon ways for moving coal in the mining areas had started in the 17th century and were often associated with canals or river systems for the further movement of the coal. These were all horse-drawn or relied on gravity, with a stationary steam engine to haul the wagons back to the top of the incline.
Nice.
The first applications of this was the steam locomotive were on wagons, or plateways, as they were often called from the cast iron plates used. Plateways.
All right. Horse-drawn public railways began in the early 19th century when improvements to pig and wrought iron production were lowering costs.
Right.
Steam locomotives began being built after the introduction of high-pressure steam engines after the expiration of the Boulton and Watt patent in 1800. High-pressure engines exhausted used steam to the atmosphere, doing away with the condenser and cooling water. They were also much lighter weight and smaller in size for a given horsepower than the stationary condensing engines. A few of these early locomotives were used in mines. Steam-hauled public railways began with the Stockton and Darlington Railway in 1825.
Oh, ain't that this fantastic? The rapid introduction of railways followed the 1829 Rainhill Trials, which demonstrated Robert Stephenson's successful locomotive design, and the 1828 development of the hot blast, which dramatically reduced the fuel consumption of making iron and increased the capacity of the blast furnace, which we went over with already earlier. On the 15th September 1830, the Liverpool and Manchester Railway, the first intercity railroad in the world, it was opened, and it was attended by Prime Minister Arthur Wellesley.
All right.
The railroad was engineered by Joseph Locke and George Stephenson, and they linked the rapidly expanding industrial town of Manchester with the port town of Liverpool. They still hate each other today.
Right.
The opening was marred by problems caused by the primitive nature of the technology being employed. However, problems were gradually solved, and the railway became highly successful, transporting passengers and freight to and fro.
All right. The success of the intercity railway, particularly in the transport of freight and commodities, led to railway mania. Okay, so we got canal mania, railway mania. Construction of major railways connecting the larger cities and towns began in the 1830s, but only gained momentum at the very end of the first Industrial Revolution. After many of the workers had completed the railways, they did not return to their rural lifestyles, but instead remained in the cities, providing additional workers for the factories.
Fantastic.
Good for them.
Look at that shit. Oh, that takes us to the old factory system.
The main part is social effects of the Industrial Revolution, and then the factory system.
Prior to the Industrial Revolution, most of the workforce was employed in agriculture. Either as
What do you do, farmer?
Right.
Farmer.
Either as self-employed farmers, as landowners or tenants, or as landless agricultural laborers. It was common for families in various parts of the world to spin yarn, to weave cloth, and make their own clothing.
Like we said already.
Households also spun and wove for market production.
Right.
At the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, India, China, and regions of Iraq and elsewhere in Asia and in the Middle East, they produced most of the world's cotton cloth, while Europeans, they produced wool and linen.
In Britain, by the 16th century, the putting out system was practiced, by which farmers and townspeople produced goods for market in their homes, often described as cottage industry. Typical putting out system goods included spinning and weaving. Merchant capitalists typically provided the raw materials, paid workers by the piece, and were responsible for the sale of the goods. Embezzlement of supplies by workers in poor quality were common problems. The logistical effort in procuring and distributing raw materials and picking up finished goods were also limitations of the putting out system.
Yeah, makes sense.
Some early spinning and weaving machinery such as a 40 spindle jenny for about 6 pounds in 1792 was affordable for cottagers. Later machinery such as spinning frames, spinning mules, and power looms were expensive, especially if they were water powered, giving rise to capitalist ownership of factories.
You ain't kidding. Love it. The majority of textile factory workers during the Industrial Revolution was unmarried women and also children, including many orphans. There's a lot of orphans in London for some reason, in Britain. They typically worked for 12 to 14 hours per day with only Sundays off. It was common for women to take factory jobs seasonally during slack periods of farm work. Lack of adequate transportation, long hours, and poor pay made it difficult to recruit and maintain woikas. The change in the social relationship of the factory worker compared to farmers and cottagers was viewed unfavorably by Karl Marx. Yeah.
Ooh.
However, he recognized the increase in productivity made possible by technology. He's like, what? I'm able to wear this.
Right. Well, moving on to the standards of living that the Industrial Revolution created or made worse. I don't know. We'll see. Some economists, such as Robert Lucas Jr., say that the real effect of the Industrial Revolution was that, quote unquote, for the first time in history, the living standards of the masses of ordinary people had begun to undergo sustained growth.
Right.
Nothing remotely like this economic behavior is mentioned by the classical economists, even as a theoretical possibility. Others argue that while the growth of the economy's overall productive powers was unprecedented during the Industrial Revolution, living standards for the majority of the population did not grow meaningfully until the late 19th and 20th century, when that in many ways workers' living standards declined under early capitalism.
That's probably true in the beginning.
Right. Some studies have estimated that real wages in Britain only increased 15% between the 1780s and 1850s,
right,
and that life expectancy in Britain did not begin to dramatically increase until the 1870s.
Makes sense. Well,
I mean, it's obviously got to take time to...
Right.
Rome wasn't built in a day.
Well, took them down in a day.
Pretty much.
The average height of the population declined during the Industrial Revolution, implying that their nutritional status was also decreasing. During the Industrial Revolution, the life expectancy of children increased dramatically. Oh, it should. The percentage of the children born in London who died before the age of 5 decreased from 74. Damn.
Holy shit.
That's why they had a lot of kids.
Well, obviously.
It decreased from 74.5% in 1730 to 1749 to 31.8, which is still high, in 1810 to 1829. The effects on living conditions have been controversial and were hotly debated by economic and social historians from the 1950s to the 1980s.
Hotly debated. I'd like to attend one of those hotly debates.
Right. Over the course of the period from 1813 to 1913, there was a significant increase in worker wages.
Okay, well, let's take a look at food and nutrition. Chronic hunger and malnutrition were the norms for the majority of the population of the world, including Britain and France, until the late 19th century.
Right.
Until about 1750, malnutrition limited life expectancy in France to about 35 years and about 40 in Britain.
Damn.
The United States population of the time was adequately fed, much taller on average, and had a life expectancy of 45 to 50 years. Yeah, baby.
Look at that shit.
Although U.S. life expectancy declined by a few years by the mid-19th century.
It did.
Food consumption per capita also declined during an episode known as the Antebellum Puzzle. What TV show is that?
Right.
The finding, the tallest refers to the finding, tallest in the world? I don't get it.
Is the height of the male U.S. population, although
The
tallest
height
in
of
the
the
world.
male U.S. population, the tallest were declined during the decades preceding the Civil War. Okay, the Antebellum Puzzles, they're trying to figure out why the height declined after the Civil War, I guess?
I guess.
Okay.
Whatever. Food supply in Great Britain was adversely affected by the Corn Laws between 1850 and 1846, which imposed tariffs on imported grain.
Great Britain don't learn, do they?
They don't. The laws were enacted to keep prices high in order to benefit domestic producers. The
I guess. Yeah, buy local.
The Corn Laws were repealed in the early years of the Great Irish Famine.
They're like, man, we need to feed these guys.
Right, because they couldn't grow potatoes anymore.
well,
so they eat
for a
corn.
minute.
The initial technologies of the Industrial Revolution, such as mechanized textiles, iron, and coal, did little, if anything, to lower food prices. In Britain and the Netherlands, food supply increased before the Industrial Revolution with better agricultural practices. However, population grew as well.
Okay, and in housing, the rapid population growth in the 19th century included the new industrial and manufacturing cities, as well as service centers such as Edinburgh and London. The critical factor was financing, which was handled by building societies that dealt directly with large contracting firms. Private renting from housing landlords was the dominant tenure. P. Kemp says this was usually of advantage to tenants. No shit. People moved in so rapidly there was not enough capital to build adequate housing for everyone, so low-income newcomers squeezed into increasingly overcrowded slums. Clean water, sanitation, and public health facilities were inadequate. The death rate was high, especially infant mortality, and tuberculosis ran rampant in young adults.
Sure hell did. Cholera from polluted water and typhoid were endemic. Unlike rural areas, there were no famines such as the one that devastated Ireland in the 1840s. A large expose literature grew up condemning the unhealthy conditions. By far, the most famous publication was one of the founders of the socialist movement, The Condition of the Working Class in England. And this was by Frederick Engels in 1844. He describes backstreet sections of Manchester and other mill towns where people lived in crude shanties and shacks, some not completely even enclosed, some with dirt floors. These shanty towns had narrow walkways between irregularly shaped lots and dwellings. There were no sanitary facilities. The population density was extremely high.
Gross. However, not everyone lived in such poor conditions.
No shit.
The Industrial Revolution also created a middle class of businessmen, clerks, foremen, and engineers who lived in much better conditions. Conditions improved over the course of the 19th century with new public health acts regulating things such as sewage, hygiene, and home construction. In the introduction of his 1892 edition, Engels notes that most of the conditions he wrote about in 1844 had been greatly improved. For example, the Public Health Act of 1875 led to the more sanitary bylaw terraced house.
Fantastic.
Oh, what does that mean? All these fucks. They're all over England, dude.
Yeah, everywhere, dude. Take out water and sanitation. See what that has to say. Pre-industrial water supply relied on gravity systems, and pumping of water was done by water wheels. Pipes were typically made of wood. Steam-powered...
Say
what?
wood?
Steam-powered pumps and iron pipes allowed for the widespread piping of water to horse watering troughs and households. Ingalls, his book, described how untreated sewage created awful odors.
Awful
Odors. And turned the rivers green in industrial cities.
Yeah, I wouldn't. Ugh, dude, do you imagine the stench? Literally, England, I mean, is famous for that, but even in, obviously, America and shit, they were just dumping shit out, literal shit out the windows.
Right. In 1854, John Snow, he traced a cholera outbreak in Soho in London to a fecal contamination of a public water well by a home cesspit. Snow's findings that cholera would be spread by contaminated water took some years to be accepted. They're like, nah, that can't be true. But everybody knows you got to have clean drinking water by now.
Well,
jeez.
only 1854.
You should have known that year one. But his work led to fundamental changes in design of public water and waste systems. That's cool.
All right, that's going to do it for us in this part one of the Industrial Revolution, because we still got a lot to go here.
Oh, my.
We're going to take a look at literacy, clothing, don't know why that's so long, population increase, urbanization, effect on women and family life, labor conditions, factories. I mean, you got a lot of stuff to look at still. And then, obviously, you know what we're going to get to after this. We're going by country, I guess. What causes what? I thought there was like a criticism. Yeah, work ethic. They're protesting it. Yeah, criticism. There's a whole section of that. I'm sure there'll be something on climate change and shit too. So, I got a lot to do on the second part of the Industrial Revolution, and this is only the first Industrial Revolution. There's a whole nother one that happened. So, hopefully we don't have that one for a long time, because we hate doing part twos, but this episode's going to be like an hour and a half, and that's already way too long.
And the next episode is going to be like 2.5 hours.
No, it's the same. So, yep, with that, go check out our YouTube at Bang Dang Network, where you can find this show every Monday, Outlaws and Gunslingers every Tuesday, and Battles of the American Civil War every Friday. And if you want to, you can find us on all podcast apps as well. Leave us a like, subscribe, review, all that shit. And we shall be back for more Industrial Revolution here on According to Wikipedia. We are the Mother Music Industry.
Bang Dang.